doing? Coffee and philosophy.
Yeah, so, Shamalama Ding Dong, welcome to the Never Green, unless, of course, we're sometimes green, but, we do Love Green podcast, whatever you want to call it, so, fuck it, dude, what's up, Cope?
Yeah, g'day dingo baby, shrimp on a barbie, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, we like to keep it green. It ain't easy being green, but you got to do what you can for the environment and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So we do our best.
Yeah, see, like, my brain was totally in, like, the marijuana direction, but, it is what it is, and it bees what it bees. So, after good old Australia was doing like the whole burning down slash getting flooded out of existence thing, well, I don't know. Are you guys doing like the whole lockdown thing? Because over here it looks like most of the country is a little locked down, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, mate. We've been on the lockdown path for a while now, and we called it a little bit early in this household. Probably about maybe 2 or 3 weeks before they started saying, "Oh, well, we're going to start shutting things down and all that kind of stuff." We were already set up to be working from home and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we've been doing for the past, little bit. Let's say for a little bit. And the states are starting to close now. So we've got three to four states officially closed. Tasmania's been closed for a while. I think it was one of the first places to close down. It's a little island down south, and they're just like, "Wait, screw you guys. We're separated from you, so we're going to close the borders." You know what I mean? SA, Northern Territory, Queensland, they've done it. We're about to do it in New South Wales as the virus spreads. So it's fun times.
Yeah, and we're definitely having one of those don't let a good crisis go to waste things over here in the U.S. While people are in full blown hysteria trying to figure out if we're gonna die from the bubonic plague, it would seem that our government is trying to end cryptography and basically like outlaw end-to-end encrypted messaging in the country. They're also having the I can't remember which one it is, like Department of Homeland Security or whatever. I think they're the ones that are trying to basically get the rights to detain people indefinitely. Without having to give them a trial or anything, which is interesting because like I feel like they already kind of like have this power because all they have to do is call you a terrorist and they can like throw you in a cell forever without like any kind of explanation or notifying anybody, blah blah. And yeah, so like we have these two things going on in the background that are totally not getting any media play because like I would say like 95% of anything you see on the mainstream news is just talking about like how crazy everything is, Orange Man bad, this is all Trump's fault, blah blah blah. I don't really care, like I've told you guys before, I'm not really going to get into the politics of it, and I don't care about Orange Man, good or bad, or any of that bullshit, but I do think the shit that goes on behind the scenes, like the stuff that they don't want you to notice while you're being distracted by whatever the current crises is, be it, like some World Trade Center towers getting, like brought down by rogue planes and the, allegedly most sophisticated airspace in the entire world, or whether it be random plague that's just trying to like wipe across the world. There always seems to be like this agenda going in the background, and we now have this relief bill that's I can't even tell you right now if it got passed or not. Like I keep hearing it go back and forth, But it's interesting, right? Because like we've always seen them be able to give like money to the banks and like these mega corporations to bail them out. But it seems like the government kind of like always balks when it comes to like actually giving people dollars, to like you know help. But apparently, what LP was telling me the other day, it's like this stimulus package, whatever they're giving us, is actually just like a an advance on our tax refunds. So yeah, like it's not actually even like a real stimulus package. Like they're not giving you any kind of like relief money. But beyond that, like if you go through the bill and like look at the shit that they're trying to pass, there's like so much like random fucking money to just, it's the pork in the bill is what they call it. But yeah, man, it's interesting to see like all of this shit going on, and we are very much sitting here seeing the government do the same old bullshit that they always do. And yeah, who knows, man? Because apparently, even though we could probably build, like a shit, couple 100,000 at least ventilators for the price of one of these fighter jets. We don't have this kind of thing prepared for, right? Because all of our taxes and all of our GDP goes to supporting the Team America, World Police, whatever you want to call it, where we go around and try to basically just crush other countries and pillage their natural resources by delivering them freedom. So, yeah, man, the world is in full on shit show mode right now. We're having the economic collapse where the government, or, well, I guess technically the Fed, is just printing trillions of dollars to artificially prop up the stock market. And it's funny because the mainstream media is going right along behind them, talking about how it was the shortest bear market ever. Like, man, look at all the prices rallying. But I think what they're going to find, especially in the long term, is that printing money to artificially prop up the price is not sustainable. So even if you can make it look like stocks are performing really well and they're rebounding really hard, eventually we, hit so much inflation that our money is just going to become worthless and then it's going to all collapse anyway. So I guess we'll see. But we definitely have some trying times coming along, guys. And I don't think I want to spend like the whole show talking about politics, but I figure we should at least do our due diligence, right, Cove? We should try to spread some different perspective versus what you see on your Fox News or your CNN or MSNBC or whatever.
Yes, we should spread the virus, which I think is the more interesting part of this whole situation, as far as I'm seeing it, is the human condition, if you will, the human interaction among this. Because, like, we know what governments do. I mean, we look at history, we look at it repeating over and over again. The government is not there to serve us, to help us. They're there to do their own thing and just give us that illusion that they're helping us and that kind of thing. So my interest kind of like strays from the government and their systems and what they're doing, and there's something that they got under the table. Yeah, that's what happens all the time. It's just another day in the government system. It's another day within these systems. But when it comes to the human condition, all that kind of thing, I found it very interesting. I saw a clip come up for those of y'all that have seen the good old Heath Ledger Joker in Batman. I'm going to post the clip here, but there's a section that where Joker's like talking to Batman. He's kind of like saying that us humans, we kind of like have this fake morale that we post up, and this is what we do, and we're all good and proper, right? But the truth is, when it comes down to it, all that morality goes away. When we're in trouble, when things come up, and we see the dark side of humanity come forward, and that's kind of like what I see in this situation right now is like, at the human level, like the individual level, when you see people, beating each other up over some toilet paper, stabbing each other, stabbing staff, right? These are all things that I've seen like happen like within the news within Australia. I mean, I'm sure it's happening in other places as well. People getting into fights, people doing stupid stuff, and then at the most ridiculous level, right, where people are spitting on food, right, at the grocery store. They're like wiping the coronavirus everywhere. Like, why the fuck would you do that? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. But obviously, when we get into these kind of situations where everything gets thrown out the window, the human mentality tends to suffer. And I can kind of like, I get it on some level. It's like, okay, people are losing their shit and they're doing stupid things. But at this kind of level, it's just like, wow, man, this is really crazy to be observing. It's a wild time to be alive right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely agree with that. And, I think it's interesting. I'm not much for statistics. We've talked about that before. I feel like most statistics are made up and are oriented to tell the story you want them to. But I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't like, on some level curious. What percentage of our society really is like these? The only word that I can really think that like adequately describes them would be like edgelords, right? Like what percentage of our society is really like the kind of people that goes out into like the middle of like this situation where people are like losing their shit, right? Like there's so much stress. A lot of people aren't coping well. People are terrified. And these people will go out and do things like what you were saying with like the coughing on, like produce and meat. Like the one store I think they said cost them $35,000 worth of inventory because this fucking person was going around and just being an asshole, like coughing on their produce and shit, and it got reported. So it's like not only did that company, like that business, like lose all of this money, but all these people that are in that area that like were relying on getting food from that place can't get food now, because obviously, like when you're in a situation like this, they can't sell that food. Like, imagine if that person legitimately has this virus and they kept selling that food. Like it would destroy that business, right? But not only that, I mean, like the human element. Like, can you imagine being the person responsible for saying, well, I didn't want to lose money, so instead we decided to just keep selling all of this shit, and it actually ends up killing like a ton of people. It's crazy, but like I think the wildest part is like what makes somebody think that this is acceptable behavior, right? Like with or without the pandemic, like let's not even take that out into the equation, but like just knowing that like you could go and get somebody sick by like doing this kind of stuff. Like we had the guy like doing his like Instagram or TikTok or whatever where he's licking fucking toilet seats talking about fuck corona. And then there's the other dude that was like licking the shelves. I don't know, man. Like it's hard for me to like really wrap my mind around, and like I get that like from their perspective they're probably trying to be funny or edgy or whatever, but like I just personally like I don't get the appeal, right? But I also wonder like since we've seen these obviously the media likes to blow it up now, because we have to make a fucking spectacle out of it and keep terrifying people that there are assholes running around trying to intentionally infect them. But like like on some level I just had to wonder like what the fuck makes people think that this kind of behavior is like okay, like what makes them think that this is the right course of action. It's really kind of like hard to wrap your mind around, right? But I mean, we also have people out there that do things like, like sign up for the army so they can go and kill kids in other countries, or, people that become police officers so that they can brutalize people and, like abuse their power. It's crazy, right? But like, I think we just have to accept on some level that there is a portion of humanity that is pretty dark and fucking twisted. And I think we also have to accept that, like, all of us have our own things, right? And I think some people are just probably more extreme or more, like outside of the realm of what, I guess we would call quote unquote normal. But yeah, man, I mean, it's rough. And it's like in situations like this, it just really kind of like shines through that these extremes and fuck, man, it's crazy, right?
Exactly. Just to throw out another Joker meme there, some people just want to watch the world burn, right? And I think that that's kind of like what we're seeing here is like some people just don't give a fuck, right? And they're willing to do these things just because it doesn't have to be an actual reason behind it. And that's what's scary. Stay at home, people. Stay at home.
Yep. So, again, I don't want to get like all depressing the whole show. I mean, I figure we could probably get into like some good philosophical topics, but I mean, again, like this is kind of like when Australia's on fire, right? Like when there are these major things happening, like it seems to me like it's almost, I don't know, like would negligent be the right word to like not even kind of like cover these topics a little bit? I mean, I feel like we definitely need a much better informed populace, right? And I think the mainstream media has obviously proved that they can't be trusted to give you, like a realistic or unbiased representation of what's going on in the world. So, that's one of the things that I love about, like, with Waves is we have, like, this, pretty big variety of shows that cover, like, a bunch of different topics, right? That all kind of, in some way, relate to different aspects of life. And, it's just, it's interesting. I feel like we have, like, our own little, kind of, like, close-knit community where we can share so much of this stuff. And, like, I can't really imagine ever turning on, like, Fox News and hearing, like, a conversation like we're having now, or, like, some of the shit that, like, Ron Don will get into, or, like some of the stuff Mackenzie Gary talks about, like, I mean, there are outlets for things like natural foods and, like, alternative businesses, but as far as like the quote unquote mainstream, like the government influence narrative, like this stuff seems like it's so far off the table that it's like we really do have to have people doing like these like indie underground kind of things just to even, like really kind of help spread the word, like educate people, find the like minded individuals that want to, I guess lead the resistance maybe, I don't know, but. Like do something different, right? Like try to find a better way.
Well, even just having the variety of information out there, and regardless of whether it's the flat Earth or all that other stuff that's going on out there, yeah, it's having like all of these different opinions and thoughts, being able to put them out on the table and really question these things in a particular way, right? Is important to sort of like have that to use your brain, right? Because a lot of us, we get into autopilot, we do the same old shit all the time. And what tends to happen with the human condition is the more that we hear something, the more it becomes ingrained as being truth. Now, if you have a bunch of outlets giving you the same air quotes truth and not letting you see the other bits and pieces, the semantics, if you will, of the situation, the narrative becomes the same across the board. So, I agree with you. It's important to be able to have this, these differing opinions and be able to discuss them in a way that helps people understand and helps us grow and helps us just think for ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been reflecting on something. Well, while it is related, it's also kind of like unrelated a little bit. But I don't know if I've even told you this yet. But like, I'm technically like I'm getting to work from home right now. And, I think you'll probably remember that I was doing this for the longest time before going back into the workplace. And it's just, it's really kind of like fascinating to me, like how much more like at peace and I guess you could say like able to maybe able to cope is like a good way to put it. But like, I mean, for the last probably like a month or two, I mean, I think I've mentioned it a few times, and it's probably like kind of come across in just like my general like energy that I don't know, man, like it's rough going and doing like the whole wage slavery thing, you know, like selling your life away for money. And it's interesting because, like, while I'm still, like, on some level selling some of my time and everything, it feels like whenever I don't have to do the whole, like, go in, deal with the quote unquote system, you know, like, interact with these people, and, you know, I don't have to waste, like, hours of my day driving and, you know, getting ready to put on the dog and pony show. To me, I mean, it feels like this is so much more like natural. Just to me, like it feels like my life is in such a better, you know, like state of flow. I've only been doing this for like maybe 5, 6 days now, but I don't know, man. It's really reminding me of how much I enjoyed kind of like doing my own thing, working from home, being able to like dedicate a certain amount of hours a day to you know just like making the money and then spending the rest of my time doing the things that I'm passionate about. You know, like I actually wrote a post, Cope. You know how long it's been? It's
Yeah.
been so long since I actually did some writing, but you know, I'm really glad that I did, and I don't know, man. Like it's definitely like putting some things into perspective, and I don't know. Whenever this whole situation blows over, I don't know how or you know whatever, but I definitely think I want to try to find something different to where I don't have to do the whole dog and pony show, you know, and I can just like live my life, do the things that I'm passionate about, and still not have to, you know, worry about struggling to pay bills and food. You know, like maybe whatever it is isn't glamorous, and you know, I've already accepted that I'll likely never be rich, but I mean, I definitely think that doing things that we're passionate about and we actually care about that interest us, I feel like it's so much more important than just chasing money and trying to like sell our life away for dollars. You know, it's interesting. I feel like I'm really getting this reminder, and I'm really you know, it's kind of like it's driving it home again. You know, like this is why I did this, and you know, it's kind of like why did I ever give this up, kind of thing. And I mean, I know why I gave it up. I gave it up for the money because it's not easy to make it just you know working from home, doing your own thing without any kind of like company. But I definitely think it's got to be possible. So that's one of the things that I'm thinking about you know trying to figure out right now is make
Mhm.
that work again. But so what's been going on in Copeland?
You know, same old. But just addressing there what you're saying. Yeah, there's that saying that goes around that's you know, if you do something that you love, you never work another day in your life. And it's interesting. It's an interesting saying, right? Because if we start like really drilling into it, it comes down to like what do we actually define as work, right? So for the majority of air quotes people, right, they'll turn around and they'll say, to you, "Oh, well, you know, you gotta get yourself a 9 to 5, and you got to be doing like the real job. Got to get out there and work the real work and all that kind of stuff, right?" So let's just say, okay, it's like a factory worker. Okay, that's a job. You get up, you go, you do it, you exert a little bit of energy, that kind of thing. Yeah, or if you go to an office, you become a doctor, and all that kind of thing. But like, let's just have a look at the statistics of these kinds of things where you have to go, you have to study, you put a lot of time and effort, you pay a lot of money to become educated, then you spend a whole fuck ton of time trying to pay that off when you actually do make money, and you don't make as much money as what you think you will. You know, right? There's a lot of things that would say becoming a doctor, your insurances and that kind of thing. You have to go to seminars X amount of times every year. You're paying a lot of money to maintain, right? That's the air quotes, maintain your status as a doctor, right? Um, so there's this concept of work that goes with that. But then we start looking at, let's just say, like an influencer, right? Like as much as we may or may not like this job, right? People go, that's not a real job. That's that's rubbish. You just like wear stuff and say catchphrases and things like that, and you just popular for no reason. At the same time, these people are doing something that they love, I'm sure, regardless of what field you're in as far as an influencer. Um, but this whole concept of what is work sort of like springs to mind, and how we define work. Because if we have a look at, say, like a musicians, right? And I think I've mentioned this to you before, Clay. I'm pretty sure it's Will I Am. He was saying that when he was starting to try and get into the music scene, all that kind of stuff, his mama comes along and says, "You need to go and get yourself a job." And he responds, "Well, I've got a job. I just don't get paid for it yet." And obviously, it worked out well for Will I Am, because went ahead and broke through, if you will. But it's about finding what it is that you're passionate about and moving towards it. And obviously, this person's like living their dream, right? Doing something that they love, and they would obviously feel like they're never going to work another day again in their lives. But how do we get to that? Right? Because we have to leave these preconceived notions of what work is behind. Because like at the moment, I'm doing some stuff with 3D modeling and that kind of thing, and whether it turns into something or not, I don't know. But that's kind of like the path that I'm going down at the moment. The path, Izzy, the path. But I do definitely have that feeling, that kickback from people that I interact with, where it's just like, oh, that's not a real job, right? You're 3D modeling. What, you're going to build video games? You're going to build apps? Like, what are you doing? That's not a real job. You need to get a real job. So how do we leave that concept behind? Particularly, they say it's hard to soar like an eagle when you're surrounded by turkeys. So I guess that's kind of like one of the main things to drill down into here, is like, how do we leave that concept behind? What do you reckon, Clay?
Well, I know that I've heard this said before, and I definitely think it makes sense, right? Like, figure out what you like to do, and then figure out how to make money doing it, right? Now, I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's definitely easier said than done. It, it's crazy, right? Because, like, I don't want to tell people, like, it's not possible, they shouldn't go for it and things like that. What I will say is, in my experience, it's not easy. The shit's very stacked against you, right? I managed to survive roughly 3.5 years just doing whatever I had to do to survive. One of the things that I kind of like, I guess, really started like kind of getting in my head about towards the end there, was that it was like, wake up in the morning, grind until I went to sleep, and wake up and do it again. And I was really stuck in that pattern for probably about the last year of it, right? Because crypto had been in like a heavy decline. The reserve tanks were running dry, and it was getting really difficult to make money in the crypto space, right? So, I started looking into other things to try to do and to try to make money. But, as it turns out, like, those things aren't things that I was passionate about, right? And so it very much started getting extremely monotonous, and it started getting to the point where I was like, if I'm spending all of my waking hours just doing this bullshit that I won't want to do, then I might as well just go get a job and make more money for doing bullshit that I don't want to do. But at the same time, it definitely feels like giving up and accepting defeat when making that decision, right? Now, who knows? Hive is here. Maybe things will be different. Maybe I can get back into, working full time in the crypto space and everything. Who knows? We'll see where that goes. But what I will tell you is anybody that wants to try to pursue this lifestyle, so much of it is going to require shifting perspective, right? Because what I found is, like, while it can definitely be possible, the way that you think things have to be, and a lot of the stuff that you think you have to have, etc., you'll end up having to like make compromises on and figure out, like, what's really more important to you. Like, what I found is, like, a lot of things, like, all the extra distractions, that, like, I would use to, like, basically numb out and everything while I was working, I had accumulated a lot of like little weird bills, like okay, you got your Netflix bill here, you got your like Amazon bill here and Hulu, and it's like looking at like all these different like expenses that I have and kind of like breaking them down to okay, well, what's really important here, right? Like, do I want to do stuff that I don't want to do to pay for this stuff that like distracts me from the fact that I'm doing stuff that I don't want to do, or do I let go a lot of that stuff and I can start living on a lot smaller budget, which means I don't need to make as much money to get by. And like there was so many compromises like that. Like one thing, I stopped eating out like ever.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's like so many things just started looking very differently whenever I got into that lifestyle. And look, I'm not saying you can't be like super successful, making bajillions of dollars, doing your own thing, and still doing all of that kind of stuff. But while I was trying to figure it all out, well, what I realized is a lot of things that like I did, like a lot of my habits, a lot of the things that I think I had to have or like needed in my life, kind of like drifted away because they're not what was most important to me, right? Like, what was most important to me was my freedom and doing my own thing and not being like beholden to these companies. So, while I was pursuing that, things started to look a lot differently. And what I'm noticing now is like as I'm transitioning, or, well, I guess I'm pretty much transitioned back into that lifestyle now. Some of these things started like popping back up, and I started like kind of like really thinking on like why, right? Well, whenever you're out all day and like you go to leave work at like midnight and you're hungry because you haven't been eating right because you've been at work all damn day. Well, it gets really tempting to just like grab something at the closest fast food place and then like eat it on the way home because who wants to go home and cook at like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning whenever you're already tired from working all day. Like things like this, it kind of like just starts to like become really apparent where like a lot of these things and like a lot of these expenses and all these distractions come into play. And wh- while like a lot of them I've avoided kind of like falling back into these pitfalls, like I noticed some of them just due to the convenience factor seem to kind of like keep popping back up in my life. So, like I said, I think so much stuff looks differently whenever you're trying to like completely rearrange your entire lifestyle to accommodate something like this. But if you're willing to, like adjust your perspective and not be too caught up on like what you think life has to look like, what I've found is you'll most likely be able to survive doing, whatever you want to do. But, you know, it might not look like you think it's going to.
Yeah, cheers, man. I think the like key element he was like leaning on there was like finding the self is like the key, and I think that's kind of like the key to a lot of what life is about. Um, because as we like grow, um, we're shaped by our parents and societal constructs, our friends, all a bunch of different things, and we end up going down this path, Izzy, which may not be our own. Right? We start shaping our lives based on what we think is success. What our parents think is success, what society tells us is success, and for a lot of people, when they actually get there, they succeed at whatever it is that they're doing, whether it's at an athletic level, maybe they're um, some kind of artist, a musician, an actor, and they reach to like that peak of what they're doing. And a lot of them will turn around and say, well, like I thought that it was going to be like, it was this milestone. Like when I get there, it's success. That's the end. I've finished. I've done what I need to do, and everything will feel brilliant. And I'm going to feel awesome, and everything's going to be top notch. But when they get there, it's not what they expected. That feeling of completedness is not there. In fact, there may even be more emptiness because of the success, because of all the things that they've achieved. They can attract the wrong kind of people, etc., etc. But what they tend to say is, that it's not what they thought it would be, and it doesn't do what they wanted it to do, and they have to find the next thing to move on to. So I think that comes from a place of building these constructs in our minds of what success is and what we're going to feel like when we get there. Unfortunately, it's not the same when we do get there. So you have people like I think Jim Carrey said it, Robin Williams has said something along the same lines, Kurt Cobain as well, all express their kind of like feelings of it's being rich and famous and having everything that you want. Um, it doesn't complete you, right? And what does complete you will be up to the individual. You have to find out what it is. Hence, why I'm saying that the key to it is knowing the self. So figuring out what it is that you want and how to get there, and defining, is it really something that you need? Like, what do you need and what do you want? They're two different things. Because like what you need, as far as basics go, you need to be able to live. You need to have food, shelter, that kind of thing. But beyond that, what do you actually want for your life, right? And once you define that for yourself, you can start heading towards it without all the bullshit and the riffraff that comes along with the societal norms, the expectations from others around you. So find yourself, because I believe, at least, anyway, that's the key.
Yeah, and I think that this is something that we should apply, definitely like in all areas of our life, right? Like, I feel like human beings, at least in my experience, we have this tendency to really like build up our assumptions and our expectations about life, about relationships, everything, right? Learning how to manage our own expectations and our own assumptions, and just like not be too caught up in trying to dictate how things have to be, and like what they have to look like. Like trying to like hammer out your definition of success. It's pretty difficult when you haven't been there, right? Like you build up all of these ideas, like all of these like check boxes, right? Like, well, I have to have this, this. And what you'll find is like maybe you can hit like a couple of your check boxes, but like you're not doing everything else exactly as you had it planned out. So like, it feels like a failure, right? Or, in relationships, like maybe the other person hits like half the check boxes, but then there's like some compromise on the other ones. But what I think we really have to do in these situations is let go of our assumptions and expectations of what we think things have to be, like what we think things need to look like, and just kind of accept life on life's terms, right? Like, I'm not saying don't have like any kind of general idea of what you want, but I feel like whenever we're too rigorous and we're too like focused on the thought form itself, we can miss the actual thing being right in front of us. So it's like, while everything may not be the way that you thought it had to be, it can very much be, or at least be on the path to being what you truly want. So, like it can be kind of like difficult to be mindful of that. And I mean, there are definitely times where I still struggle with this, like, even right now, right? Like I totally had the, for a good long while there, I had the doing my own thing that I'm passionate about, etc. But, at some point I started getting hung up on the wrong details, and now I'm in a completely different place. And, like, I can still be focused on the past and thinking, like, okay, well, I've got to get back there. But, here's the thing, right? Like, back there wasn't completely perfect either, right? Because if it was, then I wouldn't have ever had to, like, change things and end up where I'm at right now. So, to me, the first thing is getting comfortable with who you are and accepting yourself, and then letting the external things kind of like start falling into place too. And we definitely have to not be afraid to try things, right? because I know like there's tons of people, I'll see in jobs or relationships where they're not happy, but they'll refuse to change anything, right? Because what they have now doesn't like bother them enough to face the unknown, or like the chance that what they might get might not be what they want even more. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you can call that like settling, but I think on some point it's more than settling. It's living in fear of the unknown, right? Because while you may settle for something that's not really what you really want, or it's not perfect, you're not really like living your life to its fullest potential. It's that fear of the unknown and not wanting to risk like getting something worse
Mm.
to have a chance at getting something better. And like I said, it's difficult. Like that fear can definitely build up in you, but I don't know. Like I don't think we're supposed to live our lives like that, right? Like it doesn't make me happy. Um, and I definitely like I have goals set in my mind right now of like there's a couple of boxes that I feel like I do need to be able to check before I can start taking some of these risks again. Like one of them, get into a more comfortable financial spot. I don't want to owe anybody anything. I'd like to have like at least some kind of like little cushion so that, maybe I can like at least keep, like a place to live for a few months while I figure out the details. But I feel like as soon as I get these little check boxes in place, I'm gonna take another one of those leaps, man, and you know maybe it doesn't work out, right? But to kind of like tie back into one of those themes that I kind of regularly talk about, right? If you have faith in something, be that yourself, be that the universe, love, whatever it is, just having like that faith in some kind of like higher purpose, higher power, and like trusting it to guide you wherever you need to go. I feel like no matter what happens, it's gonna be all right. Like maybe it doesn't turn out like what I think I want it to. Maybe it doesn't look anything at all like what I think I want. Maybe it's a horrible failure by most people's definitions, but I think all failures can definitely be lessons if you're willing to learn from them and grow from them. And living in fear of that failure is just going to hold us back from getting to where we truly want to be.
Yeah, I feel you, man. And just something you were saying there in regards to being prepared and all that kind of stuff. And it just reminded me of the saying, that life's what happens while you're making other plans. And there's kind of like that balance. Right? There's people that just basically as soon as like something comes to mind, they just instantly straight away do it, right? And that can lead to its own problems. And then there's also at the other end of the scale, the people that always have to have that, like everything has to be 100% perfect before I make a move, kind of thing. And that has its own problems as well, because realistically, there's always something that could be better, right? For in preparation of things, that kind of stuff. You could always have things just that little bit better. So realistically, nothing's ever going to be absolutely 100% ready to roll. So you have to be able to sort of like just roll with it. Again, going back to the whole fence thing, you jump it up on that fence and just going, okay, well, it's not all one way, it's not all the other way. There's a nice area in between, and being able to sort of like establish that I may not be 100% ready, but I want to do these things. I will do it when it's good, right? So being able to define that, it's a good thing. So think about your shit, where you want to go, make a decision based on that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think something you mentioned a bit earlier. We tend to have that fear of the unknown, right? And that's kind of like a bit of an instinctive thing. Even like the saying, better the devil you know. Right? And it's a saying based around that. And also the human condition, like we have a tendency to lean towards the familiar. And it can, I mean, it's good in some sense because, you're sticking with the familiar, that kind of stuff. But as we've mentioned many times in the show, um, in the past, is that we have to be able to break free from that, because if we stick to the same shit all the time, we don't expose ourselves to new experiences, to new things, and we don't really grow. And our growth comes from that discomfort, right? From trying new things, from challenging ourselves, right? So again, it comes down to a fine balance between the two, being able to go, okay, well, some things are a bit beyond my capabilities right now, and being able to make judgments properly when it comes to these things. But being able to step outside of your comfort zone, I think that's kind of like what I'm getting at here, is that comfort zone. If we stay in that bubble, we're not going to grow, we're not going to shift, we're not going to change, and we can hope and dream as much as we want to reach that life that we want. Whether it's a penthouse in the city, whether it's a country home, like whatever it is that you're trying to go for and build your life towards, we're not going to make a move towards that unless we step outside of that comfort zone, outside of that bubble that we create around ourselves. But we just need to be able to think about it and do it in a strategic manner, so we don't overextend ourselves, and at the same time we don't stay inside that bubble forever and never make a move.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to kind of like keep in mind, like whenever we're stuck in one of those places of complacency, right? It's like it's easy to kind of like resign yourself to being complacent when you feel like it's more comfortable than dealing with like the struggle, right? Whenever we're faced with like challenges and life gets difficult, it can be overwhelming. It can be like a difficult time, right? I feel like, just like that settling or that complacent feeling, it definitely comes with its own struggles, right? And like the ones that I found myself in were, like severe depression, a lot of like anxiety, and just like in general not being happy. And I can tell you, for like a long time I stayed complacent because I didn't want to deal with like going through like rough challenges and having to like put in like all this like extra effort to like maybe get nothing. Like there's no guarantees in life, right? So why not just stick with this shitty existence that like I don't really care about, because it could be worse. Well, like that mentality is very self-limiting, right? Sure, things could be worse, you know what? But things could always be better too. And I feel like whenever we let our lives be like led by that fear of like something worse could be going on, that we're really holding ourselves back from like taking these chances and like really doing the things that like we want to do. One thing that like I can tell you, where I'm at now, and I'm not saying I won't do this now. There's a strong chance that maybe I will. Maybe this is what I'll do whenever I get into a little bit more comfortable spot. But I do wish I would have had the foresight when I was younger to just save up like a few grand, hop on a plane, and just go try to like find my way through life in Europe or Asia or something for a little while, right? Like just do some traveling, get over there, run out of money, like have to figure it out. I mean, I don't really get hung up on the what ifs too much, but like that's one of the things that like where I'm at now, I definitely wish like when I was a little bit younger I could have done it. But I also at the same time have the mentality that nothing's really stopping me from doing it now, right? I'm like, sure, it's gonna likely be difficult, and there's no guarantees, and who knows, man? Maybe I get over there and it doesn't work out, and I get stuck in some foreign country, or let's go worst case scenario, maybe I die. Maybe I get over there and maybe I get like some kind of like crazy fucking bug or virus or whatever, and maybe I don't make it back. But the thing is, like, all of these what ifs and like all of this fear of the unknown, it just keeps us from doing the things that we really want to do. And to me, like, it just robs us of our happiness, right? Like, so what if it's not easy? So what if it's not guaranteed? I mean, there's nothing guaranteed where I'm at right now, right? There's nothing saying I don't have a fucking heart attack in 5 minutes. There's nothing saying a fucking meteor is not going to come falling out of the sky and just crash right the hell on top of me. You know, there's anything can happen at any given time. Like, shit, like during the show or like a few hours ago, apparently, looks like Jonesboro just got hit by like some crazy freak tornadoes in Jonesboro, Arkansas. I mean, you get what I'm saying, dude? Like, shit can happen anywhere at any time. We could have random coronavirus 2 breakout next month. Like, living our lives worried about all of the shit that's so far outside of our control and limiting our own potential and our own happiness based on this fear is just so self-destructive to me. So, I can't tell anybody how to live their life, but I definitely think at least being mindful of it and kind of like challenging our own beliefs is definitely a good way to get some kind of like progress or forward momentum when we feel stuck, you know?
It's funny. It's like I'll write a bunch of stuff down, then you just end up saying it. So I'm basically just going to repeat what you've said, um, just responding to that. But yeah, look, I've got written down here like life is hard, right? And we all have our lives to lead. And each life comes with its own problems. And whether it's having money or not having money, there's issues on both sides of things. Like obviously, not having money means you're struggling to make ends meet and that kind of thing. But having a surplus of money means you got to deal with fake people, and there's people trying to take that money and all that kind of shit. There's problems that come with every scenario, no matter what it is, the pros and cons, if you will. So we've just got to take that on the chin. If we want something in particular, we have to deal with the good things as well as the bad things that come with it. But when it comes to living the life, right, like we need to take the chance and take the chance to make your life better. If you want to do something, plan a way to do it and that kind of thing. It's taking a chance on doing that thing because you have to let go of what it is that you're doing right now to do something different in the future. And yeah, it can be scary, right? But you have to be willing to take the risk to double down on yourself. Like you're betting on yourself, and you know yourself better than anyone else does, right? So if it's something that you really want, you desire, that's what you want to do. Well, then it's up to you to make the path towards that. And I think ultimately what it comes down to is it's the difference between just living your life and surviving the life is like what one is just making it through and the other one is doing what you want to do. So for me, I want to live, not just survive life.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I would say like transitioning this a little bit away from like the whole employment type situation, right? I think this stuff is like definitely it definitely like applies to relationships too, right? Like we've gone through these things in the past on the show. Like I've talked about my wonderful history with relationships, but again, right? Like just because none of them have ever ended up being like the thing that I wanted, or like they didn't turn out how I thought they were supposed to, etc. Right? It doesn't mean like I won't try again, And I think like the same thing applies to like our lives, like we're talking about, right? So like whatever, maybe last time I tried to do what I wanted to do, I broke free of the system, I made it for like 3.5 years, and you know what? Fuck, I'm right back in the goddamn system. It failed, right? Well, there's multiple ways to look at that. Like either I can look at myself as a failure, I can look at myself as like somebody that gave up and went back, sold out to the system, or I can take everything I learned from those 3.5 years. I can do what I have to do for the moment, and I can take that knowledge, get myself into a better situation. Because if I can make it for 3.5 years with no money to my name, nothing but like, I want to say whenever I embarked on this, I think I had nothing but like $7,000 worth of debt to my name. I had maybe like 10,000 Steam power, and this is back when Steam was worth 9 cents. So like, trust me, it's not like I had money really. And I took that Steam power. I dedicated my life to like working online and figuring out some kind of way to survive and pay my bills. And like I said, I managed to survive for 3.5 years, like completely unprepared with no idea what the fuck I was gonna do. So while I can look at that as a failure because it didn't work out exactly how I wanted to, I can also look at that as I got a lot of valuable lessons in how to do things differently the next time I try this. I can also look at the situation that I'm in right now as a vehicle to get me to that next destination of what I want to do with my life and, continuing that journey. So much of this stuff is colored by our perspective, right? So, like applying it to relationships again, right? So all of my relationships have ended pretty fucking terribly. I don't think I'm on speaking terms with anyone that I've ever been in a relationship with. Like they didn't go well. But that being said, like, does that have to stop me from trying again? I mean, I think a lot of people do get into that complacent mindset where they're like, whatever, I keep trying this thing, it doesn't work out. But, to me, like, the definition of being successful doesn't mean, like, who got it right the first time. It's who didn't quit trying, who didn't give up. Like, that's the thing, like, in life, you don't have to. Okay, this is gonna. Just to be clear, I don't want to, like, misconstrue this into relationships, but, in life, you don't always have to take no for an answer. Just because shit didn't work out the exact way that you think it had to work out doesn't mean you can't have the things that you want, right? Now, I'm not saying like don't take no for an answer in a relationship, guys. Don't let me misconstrue that here. But like just because life is fucking hard and it's difficult, and sometimes like you have to like make compromises and you have to learn and you have to try again, doesn't mean you can't have or you don't deserve the things that you want in life. It just means you gotta keep working to figure out how to make it happen. And that's how I choose to view my life, even though, so far not a lot's worked out the way that I think that I've, like convinced myself that it has to. And, things don't always look like what I think they have to look like to, be quote unquote successful. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to get there, right? The only way to know for sure that I'm never going to get there is whenever I stop trying.
Yeah, I feel you, man. Life is pain. Get used to it. Long Kiss Goodnight. Good movie, that one. Yeah, we'll chuck in a little bit of Rick and Morty there. Existence is pain. I think this is why, on the whole, psychological front, we talk about like pain avoidance. And a lot of people, we live our lives in the avoidance of pain and that kind of thing. But if we shift our perspective, if we change the way that we kind of like see these things, instead of looking at it from a victim perspective, mentality, and that kind of thing, we can look at these things that happen, whether they're mistakes or accidents, or whether it's something that's done to us. Um, we can learn and grow from the experience, and I think that's essentially what it comes down to. Is what we're doing here is um, we will have a particular experience. We will define whether it's something that is acceptable, pleasurable, or any other word you want to chuck in there to describe it. And we will decide on whether it's something that we want to interact with. And if we dwell on the experience itself, so talking about like relationships and that kind of thing, like if you went out and, your first partner, and it didn't pan out, and you had your heartbreak and you had your tears and you had all the things that come along with it, you could sit there and go like, oh, well, fuck that shit, right? It's terrible. I don't want to do that ever again. And you'd never do it again, right? You'd just sit there and go, okay, well, love is bullshit. It's crap, and just leave it be. But for the most part, most of us, keep going through it again and again. And if we pay attention to the things that happened, we can learn and grow and basically shift towards things that are more congruent with who we are in a relationship. move towards people that are on the same level and that kind of thing, and we will find something that's on our level. Right? But if we just give up on the spot and just go, "Lah, tried it, no good, never do it again, job done," we don't give ourselves the opportunity to grow, to have more experiences, and to be able to define to ourselves what it is that we want, and ultimately ends up with what it is that we do want as opposed to what we don't want. So I don't know, as much as it is a terrible thing to go through, whether it's a breakup or anything else, there's a lot to learn from that, and if we can take the lessons from it, we can end up being in a far better place than where we're sitting right now in the misery of a breakup.
Yeah, it's funny. As we're having this conversation, the movie Lost in Translation apparently like starts trending on Twitter, and this pops up for. Like, we talked about this before, but like I really fucking love this movie, and I think there's like so many good life lessons in it. But this is another thing that we haven't totally touched on too much is getting like fixated or caught up on the past, right? Like thinking things were so much better or they were like so perfect if we could just get back to the way things were, right? But one of the best lessons that comes out of this movie is very much like being in the moment, accepting things for what they are, right? Like finding that appreciation for just having a real like authentic interaction in the moment, not worrying about the past, not really worrying about the future. Like I mean, dude, if we really want to get too fixated on the future, guess what, guys? We all die. None of it's permanent. Yeah, I mean, like if you really want to go there, I feel like getting too fixated on trying to like make things last and be something other than just what they are is another great way to kind of like miss the whole experience of just enjoying life as it is, right? And I mean that works both ways, like looking back to the past and like with a relationship, thinking like if I could just get back to this one person, if I could do things differently, and like maybe it would all work out this time, or like worrying too much about the future. Well, like how do I keep this person around, because they make me happier, like the job situation, like how do I keep things perfect just like they are at my job because I'm so happy in this moment. Like the thing is, man, like it's very easy to take shit for granted, right? Instead of just appreciating things for what they are, like not clinging to them, and being willing to kind of like let the universe just do what it does. It's very easy to get caught up in our head and get focused on all of these thought forms that we create, right? And we get back into our assumptions and our expectations, like say you're you're in a good place with your job, and like you start getting to that point where like you expect every day I'm just gonna go in and it's another rainbows and fucking butterflies unicorn farts day, and nothing's ever gonna change. Well, here's the thing, man, like change is one of the only guaranteed things we have in this life, right? So I'm not saying we shouldn't appreciate things for what they are and like be grateful whenever we're in really good spots. But I think we also have to understand, to like appreciate the contrast and realize these things come in waves, right? Like good implies bad, bad implies good, self implies other. Like just because things are like on and up doesn't mean they're gonna always be there, right? But it doesn't mean we have to cling to them when they start drifting away either. So I think what works for me is just trying to be as present as I can be, right? Now, like, sometimes I feel like I almost take this to the extreme because I'll be like so caught up in just, today, because that's now is really the only time there ever is that like I'll feel like I never really make a lot of plans for the future. But I also feel like whenever we get so caught up planning for the future, it's very easy to miss all the other opportunities that come along, right? Like, okay, well, like if you're really fixated, like, on the person from the past, right, and like getting back there, well, maybe you miss, all these interactions with other people that come along, and maybe, they could be something so much better. But you don't take that chance because, you're fixated on that past event, trying to get back there. Or, maybe you're in that complacent, just trying to make it work situation with a job or a relationship, and you're, afraid to let go of it and try something different because, well, at least I have this, this was better than nothing. But, yeah, and I mean, it's definitely about balance. Like, I can tell you that because you can't really be all one way or the other. I feel like whenever we get so fixated on those thought forms, we miss the forest for the trees, Like, instead of having an experience, we're always trying to plan an experience, or we are always trying to, like, get back to an experience, and it's never the same thing, if that makes sense, right? Like, I know this one's a little abstract, but being and having an authentic experience as opposed to trying to be and have an authentic experience, like there's really a huge difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm with you, man. And it's funny because I keep thinking, like, why am I here? Right? I write stuff down and you end up just saying it. So I'm just going to echo exactly what you've just said. But yeah, look, if we have an obsession or fixation on the past, it can lead to depression. That's where depression comes from. By the same token, if we're focusing on the future, that's what leads to anxiety. So living in those spaces isn't healthy. Obviously we need to think about the future in some sense. It's healthy to think about the past in some sense. But if we unpack and we live there, that's when we have these problems and these issues. By the same token, if we are living in the present like too much, like far too present, we can end up being impulsive, right? We don't think about anything. It's not about the future, not about the past. Screw it, just do it, right? So thought comes to the mind and do it, right? Which can have some negative outcomes as well. So just like you said, it's all about balance. It's about looking at these things and going, okay, well, is this healthy? Am I overdoing it here? Whether you're thinking about the past, the present, or the future, are you overdoing it in these areas? And if you are, it's all about finding what you can do to pick up on it and put interventions in place. So if you find yourself thinking about the past too much and being all depressed about that past relationship and it was so good and if only this and that kind of thing, it's about being able to kind of like having like a safe word, if you will, for yourself and being able to pull yourself up on it and go, okay, well, it's healthy to think about it, but I'm overdoing it and I need to pull myself out of it and do something different. And this is where having activities and things that you can do, things that you can go to, is a good means of pulling yourself out of these tailspins. And again, this comes down to finding yourself, knowing who you are as an individual, acknowledging where you're at, what you're doing, and being able to choose what you want to do. Because let's just be real, like when it comes down to depression, anxiety, there's kinds of things. I mean, nobody really wants to feel like shit, right? We don't just wake up and say, how can I make myself feel miserable today? So knowing the self is a good means of being able to apply interventions and pull ourselves out of the tailspins when we get into that zone and reach that point of balance, the equilibrium, if you will, of life, which is difficult to achieve. It's almost impossible to achieve, but the closer that we can get to that equilibrium state and more balanced that we are, the better we feel about ourselves and our surroundings.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop one of those random quotes that I found, a lot of wisdom in. Look back in forgiveness, forward in hope, down in compassion, and up with gratitude. I feel like to me, it really resonated, right? Because a lot of the times, whenever I'm stuck in my head and I'm focused on the past, like what I find is either I feel like I should have done things differently, or I wanted, or expected other people to do things differently, right? Either that, or like maybe I'm just like upset with the universe for, you know, sending me in a different direction whenever I feel like things were so great then, right? Well, looking back with forgiveness, I think is one of the best ways to kind of like learn from the past and to heal, right? Because like the things that happened in our past, we have to like have some kind of gratitude for them, right? Like they essentially got us to where we are. If we can get to a point where we can accept ourselves in this moment, like we can truly like embrace our own authentic self, and we can be okay with who we are, then we have to understand that the past and like everything that happened is exactly how we got here, right? So like whenever we get caught up looking back in the past, like say like the person that cheated on you, or like when you got in that argument and like like the relationship didn't work out, or like let's say like maybe your company went out of business and it downsized and you lost your dream job, whatever it is, right? Like looking back and like getting caught up in like all of that regret and negativity, it kind of like ties us into that cycle, right? Like it kind of like leaves us into that negative space. But if we can look back with forgiveness, be that, for ourselves, for, the other person, for just whatever the fuck happened, right? Like even if it was like just outside of anybody's control, like the random meteor falling from the sky and destroying your car, whatever the fuck it is. Like if we can look back with forgiveness, then we can, like we can move past it. We can learn from these things. We can find acceptance, and we can get back to the present. Now, looking forward with hope, I feel like that's important too, right? Because again, whenever we get caught up on like the negative experiences or the things that didn't work out in the past, and it kind of gets us into like that jaded mindset of like, well, like every relationship I've ever had's been a fucking dumpster fire. Why bother even trying? All women are fucking evil. They just want to like cheat on you and use you and blah blah blah, or like whatever. Apply it to your own life however you want. But I'm saying like whenever we get caught up in like our own expectations and assumptions, and we assume just because things never worked out before that means they never will work out, right? Like we limit ourselves, and we shut off that part of ourselves that's like open to the potential of something being better. So like when we look forward with hope, we have to be like, look, so just because shit didn't work out before, maybe everything always went bad, every time I try to do this thing, it feels like I'm like running into a brick wall. Well, you know what? Like whenever we lose hope, that's when we stop trying. That's when we just get into that complacent state. We wallow in our own misery, and we feel like there's no point, right? Like it's very easy to get depressed or have like a lot of anxiety about like trying different things because we feel like they never work out anyway. Now, the looking down and compassion part, I feel like I learned so much from changing my mindset, right? For the longest time, I can tell you, I didn't comprehend compassion. What I had was pity. And I would pity people, but in my mind, it was compassion, right? Because I felt sorry for other people, and like I would either feel like maybe things were better for me, so I should feel bad for them, or maybe like I owed something to other people because like maybe something in my life was better and something in theirs was worse. But what I found is like when you look down with compassion, like when you see people that need help, or people that are struggling, you don't need to pity them. you can reach out, you can offer help, you can realize, like, dude, there are points in my life I've been in that same spot. You can find, like, that common, piece of humanity where you realize, like, maybe we're not so much different. Just because I'm not, currently suicidal or I'm not currently homeless, it doesn't mean I'm any better than this other person. We're both still human beings. Having that compassion keeps us with the perspective of, we are all one. We're all human beings. We're all just doing the fucking best we can. Now, the whole looking up with gratitude part, I think, you can look at that from like the religious or the Christian standpoint of like, looking up and thanking God for, life, whatever. I just, to me, I use the universe, whatever your term is for whatever higher power, love, God, the universe, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is that you decide to have faith in, like having some kind of gratitude for, all of those challenges and all of those struggles, having gratitude for the lessons that you can take away from them, or, like the things that make you happy and the things that are positive in your life. Like, you gotta have gratitude for that, right? Or else you're just taking it for advantage. And, yeah, like I said, I found so much wisdom in this little quote. I mean, it's so short, but it's so to the point. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, good man. I dig it. Totally dig it. Be saving that one for later. But yeah, on a more personal level with some of the things that we're talking about here, I can tell you that I myself have spent quite a bit of time in this pit, if you will, and dwelling on these things that can interrupt life and your sense of being. And I've spent many hours in the past, thinking about what could be, what could have been, um, and what could be. And the thing is, like being in that space, you don't get anywhere. You don't make any progress. You don't do anything. You just sit there and roll over these things over and over again. So having like a bit of a mantra, if you will, like what you posted there, is good for, like I was saying, like having that thing that can pull you out of it, can snap you out of that state. Having these mantras, these bits and pieces that are kind of like lifelines, if you will, when you're in these situations, because as many of us may know, that when you're in that space, in that dark space, it can seem like there's no way out. Um, and having these things can just be like that light at the end of the tunnel to guide you back into being your normal self.
And it's funny because one of the ones that like really resonated with me for the longest time, and I mean it still does, but I find it funny because it was one that was kind of like shoved into my face for so long. Like around, I think it was like around 2009. Let's just say like life wasn't working out well for me. I was very much addicted to pain pills and doing whatever and just doing whatever I had to get them, like, fucking over people, stealing, whatever. And whenever I got clean, I was trying to do like the whole go to meetings thing, go to AA or go to Narcotics Anonymous. And I would go to the AA meetings and I would feel like I didn't belong because like the people didn't want you to talk about drug usage. And I would try to go to like Narcotics Anonymous and I feel like I didn't really belong there either because there's this term called junkie pride that people like to throw out there. But a lot of the times these meetings can very much just start to feel like a one-upsmanship contest of like, who did the most fucked up shit or whose life was the worst, blah, blah, blah. And I found like they weren't very productive. But one of the things that I got from these meetings was they would always make us say the serenity prayer. Accept the things I cannot change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. I don't know. The point that I was at in my life, like I was like so like violently opposed to Christianity the thought of saying a fucking prayer just like grated on me. Like it felt like a slap in the face. Like I was like, fuck you for even suggesting it, you know? But it's funny because like whenever it really set in, you know, like whenever the words actually clicked in my mind and I started to really kind of like wrap my mind around the wisdom that are in those words, what I found is it's about surrendering and it's about letting go of that need to control everything. Because one thing that I've learned is we don't control anywhere near as much in this life as we like to think we do. So that for like the longest time became my mantra whenever I was trying to like work through my own spirals of insanity, because I basically hit that brick wall where like my mind just couldn't reconcile the reality that existed inside of my head with the reality that I was faced with in the outside world. But learning to let go of things that I have no control over and focus on controlling the things that I can, what I ultimately came to is like the only thing that I ever really have any real semblance of control over is myself. I don't control the outside world. I don't control other people. I don't dictate how life unfolds. But what I do have is some kind of level of control of how I choose to feel about it, how I choose to react to it, and whether I, you know, like get into that place where I'm just moping and wallowing and feeling sorry for myself and, you know, like life just shit all over me and I've got it so much worse than everyone else, or, you know, saying like, look, like shit happened, it's fucking rough, I can learn from this, I can do better, I can be better, and, you know, like I don't know what tomorrow might bring, but I tell you what, like I'm gonna face it in a better position than I did whenever all the other shit was going on, right? Like, I mean, I honestly, like, I hope like hell that I never find myself into a situation where I feel forced to steal again. Like, dude, like that, to me, that was one of the things that took me probably like the longest time to like really kind of like make any kind of peace with. Like, I literally hated myself for it, but I didn't know what else to do. And, you know, man, like there are things that like we do in life whenever we feel like we have no other options, and it's very easy to, I guess you could say, like beat ourselves up for it and not be able to like find some kind of like level of forgiveness, you know. But yeah, I really feel like the Serenity Prayer helped me a lot to work through this stuff.
Yeah, can get pretty full on sometimes. And it's funny, it can be like the furthest thing from what you think that can help you, that sometimes does help you. And that's the thing, like what the story you were telling just then, is that, you know, something that kind of like pissed you off and, you know, really grinded your gears, if you will, ended up being something that can help you in the long run. So I would say that's something to take into account for a lot of the mechanisms that we may have in front of us. We may see them as being irrelevant and not helpful in the time being, in the here and now. But if we look at the more the message that it actually has, as opposed to what it represents, we can see that these things can help people. And again, you know, different people are going to find different things to help them through. But as long as we find something, that's what matters.
Yep, let's see, I was trying to find one. Shit. There you go. Just for anybody that's not familiar with this quote unquote prayer. It's just funny to me, right? Because it's one of those things that like growing up in like all of these Christian households with like, you know, the Christian friends and families, and you know, going through like those meetings and things like that. Like this is something I used to see on the wall everywhere. Going to the meetings, it was something like shoved down my throat every week. And it's funny because it's something that like used to just like annoy the living fuck out of me, right? But whenever I stopped, like trying to put all of my projection and like all of my bullshit onto it, and I could just read the words and take the wisdom out of them for what they are, you know, it's just interesting whenever we can like stop being like so jaded or getting so caught up in our own bullshit that we can actually like look at something and realize, well, like, fuck, maybe there's some wisdom in this thing, maybe there is a lesson here, maybe there's something that I really should take away from it, right? Like, even if I just want to like disregard the first word and say like whatever, I don't believe in God, like maybe you're a full-on atheist. Okay, that doesn't change the rest of it, you know. Just say you're talking to yourself. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Like asking yourself for serenity, courage, and wisdom. I mean, if we can't ask ourselves for like some kind of like improvement or like some kind of understanding and like acceptance, then who can we ask, right? Like, I mean, that's one of the things that like it took me so long to really kind of like wrap my mind around, because I'd always be so caught up on how I thought other people saw me, how they reacted to me, how they perceived me. The thing is, man, like, how can you really expect anything from anyone else that you won't do for yourself, Like, how can you expect other people to like you if you don't like yourself? How can you expect other people to understand you if you don't understand yourself? I feel like so much of the external is in direct reflection to the internal. So instead of putting all of our energy, all of our blame, like all of the all of our energy into the external, and to like turn that shit inside and actually look into our own life and work on ourselves. Like, to me, that's the only thing that really works, because again, we have no control over the external. We can't dictate, who likes us, who wants to talk to us, who's gonna be there when we're fucking bouncing off the wall, or who's gonna be there when we're fucking depressed and thinking about like ending it. Like, we can't control other people, but we can very much look into our own life. We can face the fucking hard, facts, and we can try to find some kind of peace inside of ourselves. And in my experience, like, whenever we do that, like, whenever we're willing to do the work on ourselves, whenever we're willing to, like, face our grievances with ourselves instead of, like, blaming other people for everything that we see as, like, wrong in our life, that's the only way to really start making, like, forward progress, Like, in my experience, when you start changing all of your own, like, assumptions and expectations about life, and you start really trying to figure out how to make your own life better, the external just starts to kind of like adjust to that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't work the other way around, right? Like, the universe doesn't just send you fucking rainbows and butterfly land and then all of a sudden everything's magically better. You fix the inside, and then the external matches your new perspective. So, yeah, like I said, it's a prayer, but I think there's wisdom in a lot of places if we're willing to look for it.
Yeah, something I wanted to address there with the whole AANA, all that kind of stuff. The thing is, like, they're religious based, which is why it can sort of like rub people the wrong way, because as we know, religions do have a tendency to preach and shove things down people's throats and that kind of thing. And it's not that they're completely full on religious based, as in like religion runs them kind of thing. But they started from a place of that religious base. So you have like prayers and that kind of thing, and that can be like flags for people that have interacted with different religions and churches and that kind of thing, and they get that same vibe from it. So they're just like, oh no, I don't like this kind of thing. Yeah, on the whole psychology side of things, it's even addressed when you're like learning about it. They kind of like say, well, look, this thing has a heavy like religious vibe to it, the basis to it. That's how it comes across. But essentially, the way that psych works is, if it works, why are you going to, look the gift horse in the mouth kind of thing. So what it comes down to is like, if it works for a particular person or people, then let them do it. If it doesn't work for them, then okay, they can find something else. And like you were saying, just shifting a few things around, so then like it works for you, like whatever you air quotes believe in. And I think that can also lean towards the difference between faith and religion, right? Because just because we're saying the whole thing with removing the God and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't mean that we don't have faith. I mean, like, we can have faith in the universe, we can have faith in humanity, in other people, in a whole bunch of different things. But it's just that whole religion side of things can cook people's thoughts and opinions in a particular way, and make them leave it, throw out the baby with the bathwater kind of thing. Um, but I think at the end of the day, it comes down to challenging yourself, to make the changes that you want in your life, however you can. Whether it's going to these groups, whether it's having a sponsor to help you, and obviously, like in the AA setting, a sponsor is someone who helps you out, that kind of thing. When you're struggling, when you're falling off the wagon, and these kind of things, and we can apply the same kind of principles to a whole bunch of different things. So with the anxiety, the depression, that kind of thing, there can be somebody that you can talk to, someone that you can confide in, someone that you can open up to, and be able to have this similar kind of setup and outcome, without delving into the whole religion side of things and having to believe in God as heavily as it may be, so like woven into the AA-NA setup. But going back to, as I was saying, challenge yourself and do it for yourself, because at the end of the day, you're living your life, and no one cares about you as much as you do.
Yeah, what I think is what I think happens a lot of times with people and religion. And I can tell you, like, definitely from my experience, but also what I've seen with other people is, it's very easy to have a lot of like like a lot of negative interactions, like a lot of negative relations with religion. Like, I mean, I was basically, the best way I can describe it is like I was force raised Catholic, and like at some point throughout my indoctrination, I started becoming very aware of things like priest, like molesting children, for example, and like all these negative things. And I can tell you, like, it completely turned me off to religion. Where I'm at now, I'm completely okay with that, and I've reconciled it, right? Because I understand that it's not the religion that, like, I need to find my inner peace. It's not the religion that I need to guide me. But there's wisdom and there's spirituality in these things, right? Even if a lot of other people, that we interact with along that path aren't there, and we find a lot of like false examples, or like a lot of that like cliquish mentality, and a lot of extreme like judgmental behavior and things. Like, if we can stop focusing on the other people, and we can stop focusing on our own like prejudices, our own like expectations and assumptions about like what the words mean and things like that, what I found is like there is wisdom in religious text. Like that I've found the most wisdom in Buddhist texts, right? And I also don't really think of Buddhism as a religion. I definitely think of Buddhism as much more of a philosophy than anything. But what I found is, like, if I can let go of all of my bullshit that, like, I've attached to these things because of my own experiences, right? And I can just process the information and determine, like, what makes sense in my mind, right? Like, what sticks, what doesn't. And instead of, like, getting caught up on the parts that I disagree with, or, getting caught up on like the teachings that say like, I have to go to the building and pay like a certain percent of my income to hate gay people and think that all women should basically be murdered for being sluts and whores. And if I can look past that and like realize that like these things were written by human beings, like there's a lot of like flawed, misguided, outdated, antiquated bullshit in them, it doesn't mean that there's no wisdom in there, right? Like there are things that you can take away from even people that you disagree with that can help you develop your own philosophy and can help you, like break down your own beliefs and figure out what's true in your own life. I feel like anytime that we're like so completely opposed to like even hearing what other people have to say, that we're like really shutting ourselves off and we're not growing, Like, I can have conversations with people that I vehemently disagree with now, right? And, sometimes they may say something that, like, really makes me question something either completely unrelated to what we're talking about or, like, it can very likely change my perspective on the things going on. Like one of the things I can tell you, I got into like some extremely heated arguments with someone that was pushing what I can only really describe as like toxic femininity. Like I don't know, I try to avoid using the label feminazi now because I feel like it's so derogatory. But like even people that push like extremist agendas, right, or like things that I feel like are opposed to what I believe, it doesn't mean that there can't be like some kernels of wisdom thrown in there too, right? But like if I'm not listening to everything they say, or like I'm not having like an active communication with the person or like the document that I'm reading or whatever, because I already have like my mind made up that it's all garbage and nothing good can come out of this, then I can miss, like those little things, like, those little like nuggets of truth or wisdom that are hidden among all the bullshit. And I feel like at least being like open and receptive to questioning and challenging my own beliefs is the best way for me to like grow and learn and, figure out things that, come from like a very different perspective than mine. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely complicated because, like I said, a lot of these things, like I'll disagree with so much of what they have to say, but it doesn't mean there can't be some, like, nuggets of truth and wisdom hidden in there that can really have a profound impact on your life if you're receptive to, hearing them.
Yeah, I like the whole, depending on who says what, can have a big impact on how you take that information. It's kind of like why I go to the whole, like, if Hitler told you not to drink poison, would you just drink the poison because it's Hitler telling you not to? Like, there's the data and the information, and there's the source that it comes from. And if your process involves biasing the information heavily, based on the source, then you're going to be in a bit of trouble when it comes to processing the data. But yeah, look, what do you do? Like it can be difficult to see the forest through the trees, the whole baby in bathwater kind of thing. But you learn through the experience. That's all I can say.
Word. And yeah, like, again, just reiterating here, I feel like it's very easy to like develop these prejudices to like even like being willing to like consider what other people have to say when we like describe our own assumptions based on what we think their beliefs are, right? Like I can tell you I've met a lot of people that will like declare, this is just an example. I'm sorry, like this is like the night that Crim's here and I'm gonna get into this one. So I'm sorry. I don't want to like offend anybody here, but what I'm gonna say is like I've had a lot of like negative interactions with people throwing out the word feminism, right? Now, while a lot of these people and a lot of these conversations have gone into like extremely toxic places, it doesn't mean that I can't gain something from having the conversation and challenging my own perspective by listening to what they have to say. Now, I can tell you there's people that I don't really care to have a conversation with. Like, whenever they're like, all men need to die, everything wrong in the world is like men's fault, blah, blah, blah. I tend to like to look at things from like a place of we're all human beings. And I feel like when you're like so fanatically like on one side of the fence on an issue, it's hard to have like a balanced conversation with someone, because like whenever you're trying to be like in that middle ground, they still see you as the enemy because you're not like on their side of the fence, right? It doesn't matter if you're on the other side of the fence. Like, if you're not on their side of the fence, you're still the enemy. But not everyone is like that. And even the ones that are, there's still a lot of people that can still have a, like a productive conversation with you, right? Like, you can still learn things, and like while there's a lot of like bullshit and propaganda and like buzzwords, I think like ever kind of like getting into the mindset where I can't accept it, like there are some like inequalities, there are some like biases, and like there is like some of the stuff that goes on in the world, right? Like, if I'm not willing to at least listen to it or consider other people's perspective, then it is very easy to like from their perspective look at me as part of the problem, right? Because if I'm saying like like the stuff that you struggle with and like the problems that you face are irrelevant because I don't have to deal with them, then I am kind of dehumanizing you, right? Now, why would I expect you to understand like the struggles that I have to deal with, or like the like the prejudices and biases and the challenges that I feel like face me or people like me, if I'm not willing to listen to what you have to say, right? But I feel like having, like an open, productive dialogue and being willing to communicate without like attacking another person is probably like the biggest step to making progress, right? If we're not listening to each other and we're just talking at each other, then we're not really making any kind of progress. So we have to be willing to hear what the other people have to say. They have to be willing to hear what we have to say. And I think it's important to remember that the truth is often somewhere in the middle, right? Like, whenever we assume that like our own perspective is so definite and so right that like people that oppose it are automatically wrong, then it's definitely like feels to me like a very egotistical place, and you kind of get into like that center of the world mentality where you're not connected to other people. And I feel like to actually create change and to like see the world get into a better place where we all have opportunities and we can all grow and make something better, we have to at least be willing to hear each other out.
Yeah, I think that could be difficult in the current, situation that we're in, where essentially, we're living in a triggered era, right? Where anything that anybody says at any time can be taken the wrong way and be triggered, and then I'm entitled to my thoughts and opinion. You're entitled to your thoughts and opinion. It doesn't matter what you say, and it gets into this whole like,
How dare you?
yeah, exactly. It's a battle of offendedness as opposed to what is being discussed, right? So the point being discussed kind of gets thrown into into the barrel of, we're not going to talk about this. I'm just going to call you names, and you're going to call me names, and then it's just going to turn into a shit fight. And this is what I tend to see more often these days, with insults and things being thrown around. And where did I get this stat from? It might have been Peachy, might have mentioned it before, where essentially it was like toxic was like the main uh, used word like last year in 2019. Just attach toxic to everything and it turns it into a thing, right? And just throwing around like these labels and that kind of thing, like, where does the communication go? It goes nowhere, because it turns into a shit fight and name calling, and the core issue doesn't get discussed, and therefore no progress is made. So how do we get around that? That's the main thing that I'm pointing out.
Well, I definitely think that we have to at least accept and understand that you can't communicate with people that aren't trying to communicate. And you also can't communicate if you're not trying to communicate, right? Like, it's so hard to, like, until you can like really see what you're doing, like whenever you can like really start to like wrap your mind around this, like getting people to understand like when you're talking at someone versus when you're talking with someone, like it's a very different thing, right? Like especially if you look on social media, so much of what goes on is people talking at other people, right? Like you'll go make like your whole big statement about whatever on Twitter, like basically share your thought, belief, perspective about a thing, but like you're not putting it out there to like have a conversation or open up a dialogue. You're telling, right? But like whenever people reply and they disagree or whatever, and it just turns into like that. Well, now they're attacking my belief or my thing, right? The thing is, we really have to understand that like not everybody sees the world the same way. It doesn't necessarily mean the way that we see the world is exactly right, and it doesn't mean the way that they see the world is exactly right. Again, what I find a lot of times is the truth is probably somewhere more in between, At least, again, you're like being in a place where you're willing to listen and like try to comprehend what the other person is saying, as opposed to just looking at their words and being like, well, that's different than what I said, so they're wrong. Well, like that's not productive, and it's not going to get anywhere, right? Like you don't win win an argument by telling other people how wrong they are, right? I mean, personal opinion here, I don't think you win an argument. Like, I feel like you have a discussion and that leads to progress, or you have an argument and that leads to people feeling either hurt or like dominant of the other person. Now, I totally get that there are situations where arguments are almost like necessary in this society because of the way that it's built. Like politics would probably be one of the worst ones, right? But again, I still feel like having discussions is much more productive, and it leads us to a place where we can try to find some kind of middle ground, some kind of like progress that, while it may not be exactly what we want, and it may not be exactly what they want, maybe it's something that we can both abide. I feel like learning effective communication skills and how to like do active listening is such a big step to having real interaction with other people. And something I've said before, and I really do believe, I don't think text-based communication is extremely effective. I think like communication effectiveness goes from the tier of like face-to-face communication and interaction on an individual level to interaction in a group to at least voice communication. And then I would say text-based communication is like literally the lowest tier of communication because it's so easy to misinterpret what other people are saying, and it's so easy to like project your own thoughts and beliefs on what they're saying that you miss the point. Again, like learning how to do effective communication and actively listen when other people are trying to communicate with you is so important to making some kind of progress to where you can reach some kind of middle ground, some kind of understanding where both people feel heard.
Yeah, something back to something you mentioned a bit earlier there. In regards to the way that we sort of like adapt and to new information, that kind of thing. Do you think that we become like less adaptive as we get older? Like we refuse to adapt, and do you reckon that'd play a part in the communication there?
Well, I feel like it's very easy to. I'm trying to think of the right way to word this, right? It's very easy to get caught up in our own beliefs, right? The longer that we let them go unchallenged, the longer that we're opposed to like hearing a different perspective, I feel like it gets harder and harder to actually do the thing, right? Like to actually hear other people's perspective, right? Because the more convinced we are we're right, is the more convinced we are that other people are wrong. Like we have to understand that these things are like the inverse side of the coin here, right? Like right implies wrong. And I try to personally, like I try to like not get so hung up on my own beliefs that I won't question them. Because whenever I do, I stop listening to other people. But I definitely think like what you're saying there, like as we get older, does it get harder? I don't know if it really has anything to do with age, but I think it's like the more firmly we hold on to our beliefs, which can happen over time, the more difficult it is for us to question those beliefs and be, like willing to challenge them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. The main sort of like area of thought there was just to kids are like sponges; they absorb a whole bunch of different bits and pieces, and that kind of thing, and that kind of like tapers off. And it just seems to me that during that process where we don't know much and we're learning about the world and that kind of thing, we're open to different thoughts and opinions, different experiences, and that kind of thing. But as we get older, we kind of like get more set in our ways. The old dog, new tricks kind of thing. And I've seen it in a number of different areas where say for instance like with music, right? How many times have you heard like your parents say, that's not music, right? And then they talk about their music, and then you're like, okay, well, they like Elvis or some shit, right? So you look at when Elvis was around, that kind of thing, and that was blasphemy, and how dare they, and that kind of thing. And Elvis was an outlaw, and you shouldn't be listening to that kind of music, and you listen to the music that these so like your parents were into, and they were into their thing. And then of course that was controversial. Like, they were doing the twist, and that's it's erotic dancing, and it's terrible, the young kids, and again and again and again. And I just keep thinking like, yeah, I think it could be a thing of like, as we get older, we get more air quotes set in our ways, and we're less open to like these new experiences, these new things. And that could probably play heavily when it comes to these different thoughts and opinions. Even just discussing them, you're like, no, I'm going to reject this completely. Not even going to give it the time of day because they're completely wrong. I'm right. That's not music. I know what music is. Kids don't know what they're on about, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, that's definitely getting into the my perspective is the only valid one state of mind. Very, very egocentric behavior. uh, like it's interesting that like the more comfortable we are with ourselves and the more willing we are to like challenge our own beliefs, I find the less worried I am, or like the less like the less maybe like anxiety or like discomfort I feel about like listening to other people's perspective, or like challenging my own beliefs that I become, right? Because it's like if I'm comfortable with what I believe in, right? Like if I've really challenged it, and I'm always like willing to challenge it if somebody brings up a new argument that I haven't thought about or things like that, then to me like there's so much less like tension in the conversations, right? Now, like sometimes people have very extremely opposed perspectives of what they want to say, right? And they can be like the complete opposite of your own beliefs. Just because like you hear other people out, like you're willing to like entertain their line of thought and have a dialogue or a communication with them, like it doesn't mean that you have to change your beliefs, right? It also doesn't mean you have to like defend your beliefs and convince them that theirs are wrong. There's like very few things in this world that like I can't reconcile as just like, okay, we have a difference of opinions, beliefs, whatever here. Like the things that I really struggle with are people, like imposing their autonomy on others, or like harming children, like things like this. Like people that think like it's okay to do things that I feel like are in complete violation of another person's, like sovereignty, right? These are the things that I really struggle with. So, like, whenever I hear people, like, trying to, like, explain why something like, okay, well, it's not, like, their fault that they're attracted to children or something like that, right? I'm like, it's difficult for me to have this conversation, right? Because, like, these are things that I don't like have any kind of way to just be like, okay, well, I can accept that you want to go out and like hurt children, or like hurt like whatever member of the opposite sex, or like you think it's okay to rip people off and scam them. Like these are things that I can't reconcile because they're so opposed to my own beliefs. Now, it's difficult to not get into arguments whenever something is like so heavily opposed, because you very much can't reconcile who you are and what you believe with the other person, right? I definitely don't think it means that you can't have a dialogue or a conversation. Now, that being said, there are some people that we very much may not want to have a dialogue or a conversation with, and I think there are instances where that is okay. Now, I think we just have to be willing to accept that, like, if we're in this place and, like, we can accept, like, okay, well, I'm not willing to listen to what you have to say, then, we have to understand there's never going to be any progress there, like, there's never going to really be any middle ground. And, maybe that's just part of the human experience, right? Like, so there's some things that we find that we cling to and we can't let go of, and in my opinion, there are some things we're probably not supposed to. Like, I don't think I want anybody to convince me that it's okay to go out and like molest children or something like that. Like that, to me, that's like one of the most fucked up things you can do. Like, I don't want you to convince me that that's okay, and I'm not really willing to listen to your arguments of why it's okay for you to do it, you know what I'm saying? Now, there are a lot of, like, other things that are so much far less egregious that I think, we can have conversations about, we can try to, like, find the middle ground. Like, okay, you believe all men should, like, die or whatever. Okay, we can have this conversation. Well, like, why do you think this is okay? How do you think that this is gonna like play out in any kind of positive way? Like, how do you think this is gonna like let your like female-led society continue on into the future? You're gonna cryogenically freeze sperm and replicate it, whatever. Like, we can have some crazy fucking out there conversations, but I do think like we have to, like, on some level have a like a self-identity, like things that we're not willing to compromise on. I think that's part of the human experience.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it comes down to adaptability is the human superpower, and we do use it quite a lot in our youth. It may taper off towards the end there, but it is our superpower. Take on new information and adapt to that. So I say, it's our superpower. Use it. Um, yeah. Anyway, we're getting towards the end here, so don't want to get into too much of a rant.
Yeah, just catching up on chat. Sorry to hear about that, Asia. That's rough. And Cly is like the new Swoop, but yeah. So we are here at the ass end of the show. We got into a pretty deep array of topics and everything, but shamalama ding dong, much love, and I guess we'll probably have some weird noises here in a minute. But thanks everybody for coming out. Don't forget to check out the philosophy community, and ASIO's got a new community. You can share that one too. But much love, everybody. Peace.
Much love. Keep your hugs in any directions. Catch you next time.
Wind chime solo. Boom, 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 boom. Biggie, biggie, boom, big, big, boom, boom, big, big, boom. Big, big, boom, 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 boom. bop, beep, bop, boop, bop, boop. Beep, bop, boop, bop, boop, beep, bop, beep, bop, bop, boop, boom. 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 Boom.
Bow.